The nature of a thing. As of early 2023, Merriam-Webster's online dictionary had 9 definition categories, almost all of which with subcategories to define the various conditions in which we use the word thing. A word with so many uses might be considered versatile, but this versatility comes at a cost. It runs the risk of being vague. Words with such wide ranges of meaning can become tokens of confusion and not clarity. Context is one of the ways we fortify the meaning of ambiguous words and phrases, but even this has limited reach. Verbal language only has so much carrying capacity, even in the best of conditions. For effective communication, understanding what the abstract tokens being used refer to as precisely as possible is crucial. Some communication isn't that important, but because we use abstract maps to navigate various environments from physical to social, long-term consequences can emerge from miscommunication. This makes effective communication vital in certain contexts. Merriam-Webster's first definition for the word thing is an object or entity not precisely designated or capable of being designated. So we use thing to refer to something ill-defined but also something well-defined, as in, is this a thing? Or what's that thing? We use it to refer to objective forms, as in, use this thing. We use it to distinguish what we call non-living things from living things. It's a thing, not a person. Ironically, we use the word for the opposite. We call biological organisms living things, to distinguish them from what we classify as non-living things, as in, not a living thing in sight. Thing is also used to refer to separate and distinct individual facts, ideas, and relationship entities, as in, here's the thing, the essence of the thing, or love is a thing. It can refer to a concrete entity as distinguished from its appearances, the substance of the thing. Places are also referred to as things. Space is a thing. It can refer to a quality like the most important thing. It can be requirements like these things need done. The state of affairs, as in how are things or things are improving, and this thing can be looked at another way. Thing can refer to an event, possessions, articles of clothing, equipment, utensils, or associated items like bring all the party things. It can be actions, a reference to purpose, or entire sets of behaviors, doing your own thing. It can refer to an emphasis, a personality quirk, that thing he does, or the object of a quirk. Yeah, it's his thing. It can be a detail, a material, a substance, an idea, a bit of information, and the proper or fashionable way of behaving, talking, dressing. Needless to say, things can be complicated. Words. These verbal symbolic tokens we humans use to identify objects and describe relationships, that we use as tools to transmit meaning between us, is part of a much wider tapestry of communication. Things like art, body movement, and posture, organized sound sequences like bird song, all communicate meaning. So does music, so does cold, so does hot. Internal and external chemical signals produced and distributed by various biological systems are part of a complex communication system that influences the working of a vast biological relationship economy. These other objects in relationship with each other are all part of this broader category of communication. Objects and the relationship between these things is the origin of meaning. Communication between objects in nature, such as the way atoms form and relate to each other in the matrix of space and time, is thought to be based on what we call universal laws. Currently, 4 forces are thought to not only give rise to objects, but govern the relationships between them. Forces are the grammar on which the language of objects and relationships is born. Forces define what we experience. The same way certain letters and words must be arranged in certain ways to convey specific coherent meanings in written language, nature's grammar determines what objects express coherence or chaos, for what time frame, and in what environmental context these objective things are possible. The foundation of all communication is the relationship between things. Oxygen and hydrogen relate to each other to express water in certain environmental contexts. This is a relationship connection between objects. The focal point of verbal languages is identification of objects and the relationships between them, nouns and verbs, to map out and or share what's going on, to render an image of what happened, what's happening, or what might or will happen. Objects in relationship are the origin of meaning. The same way our eyes and brains team up to render colors as a map of objects in the physical world, symbolic language is also a map. The image rendered is not necessarily an exact representation of the real world, but of itself. Even our complex abstract concepts like beauty or morality trace their origins to objects in relationship, even though we might disagree on the legitimacy of those origins or their destination to the current meaning of the thing. Verbal language is a series of entities in relationship built on grammatical rules. Words are the currency of meaning in verbal communication, but they're not alone. The emotional stress with which spoken words are conveyed, facial expressions, body postures, and movements can all add context to a communication. The phrase, "good morning," can be a cheerful greeting or a mean-spirited expression, depending on these variables. A shared foundation between a sender's intent and a receiver's interpretation is essential to effectively convey meaning. For the encoding and decoding to be accurate, the carrying capacity of the method of communication, a shared sense of connection between communicative symbolic tokens, as well as a cooperative dance between communication partners, must exist. The same way nature's grammatical forces define objective forms like planets, stars, and galaxies out of less coherently developed elements, and also govern how these more developed forms relate to each other, the same nested developmental motif applies to how we came to define our world with abstract maps. Our maps begin from elemental notions built directly on natural forms and mature into more coherent and nuanced images that also relate to one another. The economy of influence in nature that defines forms and their relationship properties is mirrored in our abstract maps. The very notion of self and other is born of the abstract differentiation that emerges as a result of our recognition of coherent objects forming and relating to each other. We then use naming things as a symbolic identification of these natural expressions. The same way galaxies are a constellation of individuated objects like black holes, stars, gas, and so on, we group together using a naming convention. We also identify the social union of bodies such as a marriage or belonging to an organized social body the same way. We frame ourselves and the world at large by way of abstract categorizations, The spell cast by words is the image we live in. The origin of this verbal spell we're under is a reflection of that which is defined by nature at large. The abstract maps we employ are born and continuously develop to greater maturity in the context of this womb of natural expressions over time. The object nature gives birth to the subject meaning. They are one and the same. We are one of the many expressions voiced from this foundation. Like the developmental journey of physical elements of structure unfolds, so too do the subjects we embrace as they relate to each other. More complex layers of coherent meaning emerge from the mist the same way the network of stars and galaxies that form the cosmic web dances ever more coherently from our objective place of origin. Nature demands a specific behavioral obedience for objective forms such as that which defines our species to persist. We must effectively navigate the context of the environmental womb we both live in and depend on. There's a story pregnant with subject, told by the way nature is objectively expressed. Humans are one of these expressions. The idea maps we produce are born of the story told through the object nature. It can be said that the subject and the object are one. The subjective maps that form in our minds are a means of understanding the territory we must navigate, no different than our mind's rendering of colors of varying intensity, because the maps we imagine are born from the objective form of storytelling expressed through nature. They also reflect this objective story from which they were born. Like the sound and color maps rendered in our minds, verbal symbols are also mind maps that emerge as useful perception appendages to better understand our place and ferret out what to do to satisfy the various hungers that support persistent coherence. These hungers, from which we are composed, are born of nature's storytelling aspect. A story that tells the tale of the necessity to journey through an environment with both nourishing and antagonistic aspects, and to sift these variables, translating the nourishing aspects into the more permanent patterns that define our being. This necessity is the birthplace of ritual, to nourish, sustain, and support growth toward a more mature state of being, a more coherent form. Effective negotiation of the environment involves employing specific actions in specific contexts. This relationship dynamic is the essence of a language's capacity to produce coherent meaning. This necessity to navigate with specificity demands a certain devotion to exploration and discovery. It also demands that we enshrine the things that render images and proportional actions that enable our continuation. Out of this selective process of valuable expressions, a more coherent expression of self in the context of the environment emerges. Over time, a more adaptable collection of the necessities of persistent being is either what we become or we cease to be. The same way a child develops in the womb, we develop as a species in the larger environmental womb of nature. It is a nested architecture of self-similarity. Patterns that support coherence are expressions of persistence, a demonstration of obedience to nature's demands for coherence. If we bow to the necessities of continuing the journey, we persist. If we do not, we desist. Devotion to the necessities of remaining coherent and developing through time is the nature-defined journey we are on. Without sufficient attention to the necessities of the journey, we lose progress and integrity. This is also how, as objective forms, we express the nature of nature through our biology. This objective necessity of being is the origin of subjective words like duty and obligation. We connect the story told by nature to symbolic expressions as a means to map out our place. Symbolic tokens of awareness that more effectively reflect the objective territory help us navigate. Biology is a sophisticated local expression of this omnipresent natural architecture of the journey toward greater coherence, guided by the fundamental forces threaded through all aspects of natural expression. Nature is language.